Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into my latest video. I'm going to be continuing my series that I started this past Saturday, where I'm going to be breaking down each position into tiers of how I view these players heading into these upcoming fantasy football drafts. I started with the quarterback position on Saturday. If you have not watched that video yet, please go back and watch that. Today, I'm going to be diving into the running back position. I got, I think, yeah, 6 tiers. I have about 50 or so running backs broken out into. These are running backs that I'm okay leaving the draft with. If there's some running back names on here you didn't see, it's just that I can kind of wait and see how their situation plays out in the season. Maybe pick them off the waivers unless somebody really impresses me over the next few weeks during the preseason games. With that being said, let's just go ahead and dive into this because I do have a lot of running backs to talk about tonight. So my first tier of players that I will be speaking about, these are going to be running backs that I feel safe as my RB1 tier. So what does that mean? I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The running backs that you're seeing listed here, I am totally okay selecting them as my RB1 on my depth chart for my fantasy rosters this season. A lot of it is because majority of these players are going to dominate the touches in their backfield. They either just got a new contract, and as you guys have probably heard me say and other people say in the fantasy football world, sometimes you just want to follow the money. And when a team gives a player a contract with a lot of money, they're going to want to feed him the ball as long as he's healthy. So, as long as all these players that you see here are healthy, I think they're good options to have as your RB1. My number one guy I like is Bijan Robinson. Obviously, he just got that huge contract. I think he's going to get fed the ball. Kevin Stefanski is coming from Cleveland. Kevin Stefanski loves to run the ball. Think about what he did with Nick Chubb throughout all those years. I think Bijan has a chance to be an offensive player of the year type of season as long as they can get some type of quality quarterback play so they're not loaded in the box against Bijan, but he also has that receiving ability. Same thing with Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is now officially the top paid running back in the NFL. We saw David Montgomery. He has gone down to Houston, so this is now Jahmyr Gibbs' backfield. I think they're going to give him the ball, and what he also has that value is as a receiver, because especially in PPR leagues, he can get those dump offs, get you some easy points. One stat I did find this offseason about Gibbs is he's actually one of 4 running backs in the NFL who average at least 5 yards per carry with a minimum of 540 attempts and averages at least 7 yards per reception, a minimum of 60 receptions since 2023. Jonathan Taylor reestablished himself last season as one of the best backs in the NFL. He's one of my favorite players, obviously as a Colts fan. But yeah, he's going to be the bell cow running back for the Colts this year, and I expect him to continue to get a lot of touches. Speaking on Jonathan Taylor, he did pop up on some of my research of stats I did this offseason. He's one of 4 running backs that have at least 4 50+ rushing touchdowns, 50+ yard rushing touchdowns in the regular season since 2023. He's also one of 4 running backs who have at least 11 regular season games with 100+ rushing yards and at least 1 touchdown since 2023. And he's also one of 4 running backs who average over 77 rushing yards per game and have at least 38 total touchdowns since 2023. Saquon Barkley, maybe his season didn't go the way you wanted it from him last year, but I still trust Saquon Barkley in my running back 1 spot. He's going to get fed the ball. They moved on from AJ Brown. So I think they're going to lean into him a lot and not try to put all the pressure on Jalen Hurts in that passing attack this year. Speaking of Barkley, he's one of those 4 running backs that have at least 4 50+ yard rushing touchdowns in the regular season since 2023. He's actually one of 4 running backs that have an active streak right now of at least 5 regular season games in a row with 50+ rushing yards. And he is one of those 4 running backs who have at least 11 regular season games with 100+ rushing yards and at least 1 touchdown since 2023. James Cook's another guy. He got paid last offseason, but I think he's going to continue to get a lot of touches in Buffalo because, obviously Josh Allen is the guy that makes that is the engine of the offense. But they brought in DJ Moore. They got Dalton Kincaid, who I told you guys about and I liked in that video a couple weeks ago. But James Cook is still their best skill player that they have in that offense, and he's going to get a lot of touches. Speaking of James Cook, he is one of those 4 running backs who have at least 11 regular season games with 100 plus rushing yards and a touchdown since 2023. And he's one of the 4 running backs who average at least 5 yards per carry. Again, that's minimum of 540 attempts, and averages at least 7 yards per reception, minimum of 60 receptions since 2023. Another running back, I think you can trust him as your RB1 as long as he can stay healthy. Is going to be that young running back Devin Achane from the Dolphins. One thing, not only he did get that contract this offseason, I saw that his new head coach Jeff Hatley said today, or maybe it was yesterday on NFL Network, he said he told Achane that he better be conditioned because he's going to get a lot of touches, and he has to. Miami doesn't really have any proven wide receivers. They don't have a proven tight end. They can't put all this pressure on Malik Willis. So they're going to have to lean into Achane. And even though this is a bad team he's playing on, and you could get worried about the game script not going his way because you could see the Dolphins having to throw the ball a lot in games, well, he's got receiving ability. So I think that's actually going to help him out. And speaking of him, he's actually one of 4 running backs that have at least 4 50-plus yard rushing touchdowns in the regular season since 2023. He's also one of 4 running backs that have an active streak of at least 5 regular season games in a row with 50-plus rushing yards. And he is one of those 4 running backs that average at least 5 yards per carry, minimum of 540 attempts, and at least 7 yards per reception. Minimum of 60 receptions since 2023. Now, these next 2 guys on the list, I'm worried, right? Because both Christian McCaffrey and Derrick Henry, right? They have been one of the top elite fantasy options you can do every year. And every year you're like, man, I don't know. This is the year I want to stay away from them. But they continue to produce and they continue to finish as an RB1. So honestly, it's a risk you have to take. But until proven otherwise, they are still worthy of the running back 1 spot in your roster. Christian McCaffrey, he's dealing on a team that has a lot of injuries at the wide receiver spot. We'll have to see when George Kittle can get into the lineup, but regardless, he's in that Kyle Shanahan offense. As long as Christian McCaffrey is healthy this season, he's going to get a lot of touches. And speaking of him, he is one of those 4 running backs who average over 77 rushing yards per game and have at least 38 total touchdowns since 2023. And then Derrick Henry, of course, he's going to be in all these stats I was talking about. He's one of 4 running backs that have an active streak of at least 5 regular season games in a row with 50-plus rushing yards. He's one of the 4 running backs that have at least 11 regular season games with 100-plus rushing yards and 1 touchdown since 2023. He's one of the 4 running backs who average over 77 rushing yards per game and have at least 38 total touchdowns since 2023. And the surprising stat with Derrick Henry, right? The first half of it, not that big of a surprise, right? He's one of the 4 running backs who average at least 5 yards per carry, minimum of 540 attempts. And he's also averages at least 7 yards per reception, minimum of 60 receptions since 2023. He's only one of 4 running backs that have both those categories where they're over those marks. Moving into my next tier of players, it's just a couple young guys. Now, these are running backs I take a chance on as my RB1 tier. So what do I mean by this tier? If I were to miss out on any of the running backs that I just spoke about, and I'm sitting there and I don't have my running back yet, my RB1 on my depth chart, these are 2 guys I'm willing to take a chance on just because of where they got drafted. Starting with Ashton Jeanty at the Raiders. Did his rookie year go the way that most people wanted it to go? Not really. It was just a bad situation with the Pete Carroll at the head coaching spot. They had a very bad offensive line. But I think we're going to see an improved offensive line play from the Raiders, mainly because they signed Tyler Linderbaum from the Ravens this past offseason. He's arguably one of the, if not the best center in the league. So that alone should help the rushing attack in Las Vegas. They got Clint Kubiak coming in from Seattle. Remember how they utilized Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet in that running game last year? Clint Kubiak's dad is known for having that running type of style offense. He worked with Kyle Shanahan in the past. So I'm just expecting, just because of bringing in Linderbaum and bringing in the type of mind that Clint Kubiak is, that we're going to see a much improved running game from the Raiders. And the fact that Ashton Jeanty was, a top 5 pick, I believe, in his draft class. You don't take a guy that high, you're not going to feed him by year 2. So the reason why I'm willing to take a chance on him is he should get enough touches where his volume, sometimes you want to bet on the volume, his volume of touches puts him in the category where you can take a chance on him. Another guy that got, he went number 3 overall, Jeremiah Love, the rookie running back out of Notre Dame. I'm willing to take a chance on him. Yes, he might be into a scenario that Ashton Jeanty was in, right? A highly drafted running back going onto a bad team. But there's a couple things why I like about him is, yeah, he might be on a bad team, but Jeremiah Love's their best receiving back that they have in Arizona. So if the Cardinals are down, he's the only running back they really have. I trust that they're going to dump the ball off to. Again, they invested a number 3 overall pick into him, so I expect him to get a high volume of touches. You got Matt LaFleur coming over from that Rams offense. What does Sean McVay like to do? He does like to lean in, even though he has Stafford and all those weapons out there, he does like to utilize his rushing attack in that offense. So I'm looking for Matt LaFleur to do the similar thing, similar to how his brother does, Mike. Or is it Mike LaFleur? I might got the brother names mixed up. I do apologize about that. But similar up to Green Bay, where his brother coaches, right? And how his brother uses Josh Jacobs is how I think they're going to try to utilize Jeremiah Love in Arizona. So again, both these guys, I don't necessarily want to draft them as my RB1. Ideally, I pair these guys as an RB2 with one of the guys I just spoke about. But if I were to miss out on all the players in my tier 1 guy that I just spoke about, these second tier guys, these 2 players, I'm okay drafting as my RB1 in drafts this year. Moving into my next tier of players, these are RBs I believe that offer a high ceiling as an RB2 tier. What does this mean? These are running backs where I don't necessarily want to draft them as my RB1. I prefer to draft them in my RB2 spot on my depth chart, pair them with one of the previous running backs that I spoke about. But I believe all 5 of these running backs, if everything goes their way this season, they can finish as an RB1. Breece Hall, he got the contract from the New York Jets this offseason. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes you just want to follow the money. They don't have a lot of offensive playmakers in that offense. They got Garrett Wilson. We'll see if maybe A.D. Mitchell can do something for them this year. But I expect that Breece Hall, as long as he's going to be on the field, he's going to get a high volume of touches. And this Jets offensive line, it should, in my opinion, be much improved from last year. So if this offensive line improves, I could see Breece Hall having a huge season for the Jets where he's going to dominate most of their yards and touchdowns by the end of the year. Chase Brown, I think, is just a high-quality RB2 who has the potential to finish as an RB1. Obviously, yeah, they got Joe Burrow. They got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who are going to that's who the offense is going to flow through. But at some point, you think the Bengals are going to want to take some pressure off Joe Burrow, not try to have him drop back, 40 times a game and take that risk of him getting hurt. So I think you're going to have those games where Brown is going to get you anywhere between 12 to 17 touches, and he has that capability to win you a game on any given week if he is getting those 12 to 17 touches. So that's why I have no problem drafting him as my RB2, and I would not be surprised if he finishes as a top 10, top 12 fantasy running back by the end of the year. Now we got the Super Bowl MVP coming over to the Kansas City Chiefs, Kenneth Walker. He got that big contract from Kansas City. And the reason why I like him is I think that their Kansas City is going to lean into Kenneth Walker to help, kind of what I just talked about with Chase Brown, to take off that pressure off of Patrick Mahomes. I remember like Brian Westbrook for Andy Reid back in his Eagles days. I kind of can see Kenneth Walker being utilized like that because I think one of Kenneth Walker's underrated abilities is you can use him as a receiving back in the screen game. So I think Kenneth Walker is not only going to get a lot of touches on the ground, but I think he's going to be utilized as a receiver quite a bit in this offense. I don't necessarily want to draft him as my RB1, but I think he offers a high ceiling because he's going to be in a Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes Mahomes offense that doesn't really have, like, yes, they have Rashee Rice, who I think he got banged up the other day. Xavier Worthy got banged up the other day. They kind of got some potential playmakers out there. Travis Kelce's old. I do think this offense is going to flow through Kenneth Walker, which is why I think he has a high ceiling this year. Now, these next two guys are two young guys where you got to hope it works out for you, because I do believe Omarion Hampton and Bucky Irving are high ceiling players, but they also have a very low floor. So I do believe you'll be taking a very big chance on both these guys. But I do love Omarion Hampton. I loved him last year. Obviously, he got hurt at some point last year, and then it just never really went his way in his rookie year. But what I'm betting on is you got Mike McDaniel coming over from the Dolphins, who loves who's probably one of the smartest running game coaches in the NFL. And you think about how he utilized Devin Achane and all those running backs during his time in Miami. I think they're going to utilize Omarion Hampton in that way. And if he can get consistently 12 plus touches in a game, I think he's going to have a big season for that Los Angeles offense. And I think what's going to help him too is, as long as that Chargers offense stays healthy, he can have like an RB1 type of year. Bucky Irvin was just as the rookie season was an RB1. He was a top fantasy pick last year. Obviously, his injury and everything off field did not go his way last year. So that could make you hesitant. And like I said, he's kind of a low floor. He's a high ceiling, low floor risk this year. But if Bucky can get his career back on track and he could be one of the focal points this year in the Bucs offense, he can supplant himself again as one of the best fantasy backs to have on your rosters. So these next tier of guys, these are running backs I believe that offer a high floor as an RB2 tier. So meaning, these are guys where I don't know if they're going to help you win the fantasy season, but I think they're going to be able to. These are guys, if you wanted to draft them as a safe RB2 option, who's going to get you a steady flow of points throughout the year, have certain games where they win you matchups, but I don't know if they're going to put you like over the hump. So just kind of running down the list, you got, I guess it's Travis Achane Jr. I guess that came out about a week ago. It's going to be hard for me not to say Travis Etienne, but obviously he went to the Saints. Honestly, he shouldn't, just because he got that contract. I did debate him putting him in the high ceiling tier, but he obviously still has Alvin Kamara there. So that's why I have him as a high floor, because I do think Kamara is going to have some type of role in this offense, which is going to limit the ceiling of Etienne or Etienne, however you want to say his last name now. But yeah, I still like him as a high ceiling RB2. Josh Jacobs, he usually is an RB1 because all the touches he usually does get for that Packers offense. But obviously we have the off the field issue where he could be suspended potentially this year. So obviously that lowers his ceiling. He's now dealing with a groin injury in training camp. And I don't know. This is a year where I don't think he's going to finish as an RB1. But if he doesn't get suspended, he doesn't deal with any type of injuries throughout this year, I do think he can at least give you a high floor as a RB2. Quinshon Judkins, he's a young guy I really do like, but I didn't know where to put him just because I don't know how this Todd Monken offense is going to truly look in Cleveland. Is it going to be a very bad offense where they're going to have to, a very bad Cleveland Brown team, which we're used to, where they're going to have to throw the ball a lot? If they do, I do think that limits Quinshon Judkins' impact as a fantasy running back. So that's why I didn't want to move him into the high ceiling tier, but I do believe that he's going to dominate the touches in the backfield. So I think he has a high floor where they can at least lean into the run and take the pressure off whoever the quarterback is. He can give you some value as an RB2. David Montgomery obviously got traded to the Houston Texans. He's going to dominate the touches there in Houston. And as long as he's healthy, I think he can get you a steady flow of points. DeAndre Swift for the Bears. He's got he might be at the end of his contract, but he still has that contract from Chicago, right? So they're gonna still want to feed him the ball. Yes, they got Kyle Monangai, who I'll talk about later, but I still think DeAndre Swift, because of his receiving ability, especially if you play in half point or full point PPR leagues, he can give you value. Kieran Williams. for the Rams has kind of always been an underrated fantasy option. I think he's got a high floor just because, like I mentioned about Sean McVay, he does like to utilize his running backs. But speaking of Williams, he's actually one of 4 running backs that have an active streak of 5 regular season games in a row with 50-plus rushing yards. And then he's also one of 4 running backs who average over 77 rushing yards per game and have at least 38 total touchdowns since 2023. And the last running back in this tier is going to be Javonte Williams, the pleasant surprise for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, you're betting on him repeating that success, but that's why I put him in the high floor because he got a contract right from Dallas after doing what he did last year. He did get a contract, so he's going to get fed the amount of touches. I do have my doubts if he's going to repeat that type of success, but I do think he offers you a high floor if you wanted a safe option at your RB2 spot. My next tier of players, so these are running backs to stash on your bench tier. So what do I mean by that? So every single running back that I just spoke about in these previous tiers, those are running backs I either want to draft as an RB1, draft as an RB2, or if I can, maybe get one of those guys as my as a flex. So I prefer the previous running backs I talked about to be like starting lineup level players. These are guys where they can be starting level running backs, but I don't want to trust them literally in the first week or two because as you can see, these are running backs I think are going to split touches with their name that you see them next to, right? So, Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson are likely going to split the touches in New England. I prefer Henderson over Stevenson just because Henderson's the more younger back. He's got the receiving ability, and he's more explosive. Speaking of Henderson, even though he only played 1 year, which was his rookie year last year, he's actually one of the 4 running backs that have at least 4 50-plus yard rushing touchdowns in the regular season since 2023. So I am pretty high on Travion Henderson, but I just don't want to draft him to be my starter. I would rather draft him to be on my bench, see how his situation plays out in New England before I slide him into the starting lineup. So again, I'm not saying none of these guys are starter levels. I just think you want to maybe kind of see how these first 1 to 3 to 4 games of the season play out before you slide them in as starters unless you are dealing with early injuries. Rico Dowdle and Jalen Warren for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Those guys are likely going to split touches. I do prefer Dowdle over Warren because I do like what Dowdle did, and they did sign him despite having Warren on the roster. Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. I do prefer Spears. I spoke about him in my running backs to target late video, which if you haven't watched, please go back and watch that. I think Rachaad White could be a very sneaky steal where he can maybe provide you early flex pay to begin the season, but they still obviously got Bill Crosby-Merritt. J.K. Dobbins, obviously, when he's healthy, he's very productive, but the biggest issue is with him being healthy. So that's why I'm not trying to draft him as a starter. Would rather draft him on my bench, and obviously they still got R.J. Harvey. Everybody's fantasy darling this year is going to be Bashaw Tutin from the Jaguars. I like what he offers, but I do wonder if he does have a lower ceiling than what people are giving him, just because I do think Chris Rodriguez Jr., who came from the Commanders, is going to have a role in the offense. And I could see Rodriguez getting more of the goal line touches than Tutin this season for the Jaguars. And the reason why I'm kind of hesitant on Tutin this year is I think they're going to lean into that passing attack a lot in Jacksonville just because they have so many weapons and they're paying Trevor Lawrence to be the guy in Jacksonville. Cam Skattebo and Tyron Tracy Jr. Obviously, I kind of prefer Skattebo, but I would rather stash Skattebo on my bench, see how he looks post-injury before I'm trying to put him in any of my starting lineups this season. Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks. Obviously, Chuba's been a nice little fantasy option over the last couple years, but watch for Jonathan Brooks. He's been very impressive during training camp, but his issue is he came into the NFL hurt. I believe he got hurt last preseason, but he's fully healthy now. So keep an eye on that Carolina backfield because Jonathan Brooks could eventually be a steal and might be a name that you want to stash on your bench when you leave the drafts. And then you got the rookie for Seattle, Jadarian Price, and then you got Zach Charbonnet. Now, Zach Charbonnet obviously got hurt in the playoffs last year, but when I checked last night, it does sound like he has a chance to be back in the first month of the season. But they did spend a first-round pick on that Notre Dame running back, Jadarian Price, so he's likely going to get majority of the touches to start the year for Seattle. And again, those are two guys. Well, especially with Charbonnet, you're not going to really draft him to play him. You probably if you have an IR spot, you can maybe draft him, slide him in your IR, free up a bench spot, and maybe pick somebody off the waivers. But with Price, I would just maybe give it a week or two before you play them, just because you don't know if they're going to lean into a rookie that early into the season. They could utilize some of the other guys they signed this offseason. And also, Clint Kubiak left Seattle. So what's this offense going to look like for the Seahawks this year now that they're OCs in Las Vegas? And then you just got some of the veteran guys in Minnesota, Aaron Jones Jr. and Jordan Mason. Don't necessarily love either of them as a fantasy option, but with the running back position, sometimes you just got to take chances at one of those two guys in Minnesota, either Aaron Jones Jr., who is usually hurt often. Maybe I kind of lean more Jordan Mason. One of those guys are probably going to dominate the touches in Minnesota unless they somehow acquire a veteran running back via trade or maybe sign somebody off the streets prior to the season. And then to go ahead and wrap this video up, these are my top handcuff running back tiers. So these are guys where if you got an extra bench spot, or if you do draft a guy very high, I always suggest having the handcuff just in case anything happens. Obviously, it's so weird having Alvin Kamara as a handcuff, but I do think, like I mentioned, with Travis Etienne or Achane, however you want to say his name now, getting that contract for New Orleans, I do expect he's going to dominate the touches. But if you get Etienne again, I'm going to butcher that name for the foreseeable future till I hear everybody say how you should say it. But if you get Travis Etienne Jr., I would definitely recommend getting Kamara on the bench. Tyler Algier, he did get a contract from Arizona. But so if you do draft Jeremiah Love, I definitely recommend getting him. If you decide to go with David Montgomery as a safe RB2 option, I definitely would recommend stashing Woody Marks, his handcuff, on the bench, because if Montgomery gets hurt, Marks is going to dominate the touches. Kyle Monangai, I loved what that kid did for the Chicago Bears last year. Obviously, if you get a DeAndre Swift at your RB2 spot, I would recommend getting Monangai on the bench behind him. Same thing, Kieran Williams. If you get him, I recommend getting Blake Corum on the bench because if he gets hurt, Corum's going to dominate the touches in Los Angeles. Kenny Gainwell, remember what he did for the Steelers last year? Well, actually, he's now down here in Tampa. So he's going to be the backup to Bucky Irving. So Bucky gets hurt again this year. They gave Kenny Gainwell a contract to come down here to Tampa. So I do think he's the option to have the stash behind Bucky if you decide to take a chance on Irving this year. Tank Bigsby, sounds like he's been flashing. We saw him actually do some good things for the Eagles last year in limited action. Sounds like he's been looking pretty solid, and he's actually might have a role in this Eagles offense. So yeah, if you draft Saquon Barkley as your RB1, I definitely recommend having Bigsby as a stash handcuff option on your bench. Dylan Sampson is a kid I just loved out of Tennessee for the Cleveland Browns. If you get a Quinshon Judkins, I definitely recommend getting Sampson because I do think he's going to provide some value if Judkins gets hurt. If you guys watched my 5 running backs to target late video, you guys know I love Jaden Blue, and it looks like he's flashing in training camp. You know, that's making me giddy about what he could do for this Cowboys offense this season. So yes, if you do draft a Javonte Williams, I highly recommend getting Blue on the bench to back him up. Isaiah Pacheco. So if you draft Jahmyr Gibbs this year, Pacheco will likely be the handcuff for Jahmyr Gibbs, but I do want to mention he has sprained his MCL, but they said that he should be back by the season opener. So maybe you don't have to draft him. You might be able to get away with picking up Pacheco off the waivers in the first week or two if he's not back by the season opener. But just keep that in mind. If you do get Gibbs, you're probably going to want to get Pacheco on your bench as your handcuff option just in case Gibbs were to get hurt. And then Brian Robinson, he came over from the 49ers. He's with the Atlanta Falcons right now. So if you spend that #1 overall pick on Bijan, if you want to avoid having to scramble for an option, if Bijan unfortunately does get hurt this year, Brian Robinson is likely going to be the running back in Atlanta that dominates the touches if Robinson gets hurt. That sounds so weird. If Bijan Robinson gets hurt, you guys heard it. All right. It's a long video, so let me get this wrapped up. So that is my running back tier video. As I always say, guys, if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel or TikTok, please hit subscribe on YouTube and TikTok. Follow me on X. Follow me on Instagram at CodyTalksNFL. My next video I plan on doing will be my wide receiver tier video, and I'm shooting to get that out on Saturday. So I'll talk to you guys then. Peace out.